Welcome back to this lesson and thanks for joining me again. And in this lesson, we will learn about two important aspects of data. One is the classification of data, and the second one is the life cycle. Let's start with classification of data. In AWS S3, we have something called as S3 storage class. S3 storage class represents the classification assigned to each object in S3. I'll show you what I mean. So I'll go ahead and start uploading a file and you get a pop-up like this. You can either drag and drop or click on add files. So I will go ahead and drag and drop, let's say a file called as CIA triad into this, and this is an MP4 file. It's a video, okay? I'm gonna upload this. Now if I click next, these are certain permissions which I'm gonna ignore. I will leave the public permissions as well. And now this is where the storage class comes into picture. In one of the lessons, I did mention that I'll explain this later, but now is the time. So there are several pieces of information about storage classes. You have the name of the storage class in the first column, and then you got what it is designed for, what you can store, or the whole purpose of this storage class. And then you got the minimum number of availability zones, followed by the duration time, or the minimum amount of time for which you will be billed for that particular storage class. And then the size, which is the minimum billing size for an object in that particular storage class. You got two more columns here which have been lately added, where you got monitoring and automation fees, and the only storage class where you will have the fees applicable will be per object in the intelligent tier, right? And then finally the retrieval fees. There is a cost of retrieval as well, and the highest retrieval fees is in Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive. We'll talk about those, but then starting with the first one. Now, the first storage class is standard storage class. This storage class is the most frequently used. So when you upload the object, by default, it goes into storage. And that's how you could access your objects right away, very quickly, like within milliseconds. You want to be able to get that file and download it immediately, then standard is the storage class that you would like to use in this use case. Notice that you got minimum 3 availability zones and there is no minimum storage duration or minimum size for billing. But the thing to keep in mind is that this storage class is also the most expensive because it's got a lot of flexibility. You're not paying any retrieval fees, but you will be paying a lot if you access that data frequently. The next storage class is the intelligent tiering. Now, this kind of tiering is for data where you are not quite sure what the access pattern is going to look like. So when you are uploading the data into your bucket, you really don't know whether the data is being frequently accessed or not frequently accessed, or are you uploading it for the purpose of archiving. If you do not know that, then you got to select intelligent tiering. Over a period of time, this intelligent tiering will look at the patterns for how the file is being accessed. And then based on those patterns, it's gonna move that data between the various storage classes. Now again, as you see, we got minimum of 3 availability zones and the minimum billing duration is 30 days. So if you put something inside this kind of tiering, it's gonna bill you at minimum of 30 days. All right. Now the next storage tier is the standard infrequent access. This closely resembles with one zone infrequent access as well. The only difference is that in standard infrequent access, you got your data in 3 availability zones minimum, but in one zone infrequent access, it's gonna be there in minimum 1 availability zone. Well, that's the biggest difference there. But if you choose either of these storage classes, you're gonna do that only if you plan to access the data infrequently. But you'll still have kind of a millisecond latency there, right? So in both of these cases, we'll have that millisecond latency, but it is still used for infrequent access. The main difference is the resiliency between both of these. So just in case there's a natural calamity, like let's say hurricane, a tornado, or an earthquake, or anything that you think will be causing a data center failure. In that case, the entire data will be unavailable, right? And it's going to be a big problem if you have chosen one zone infrequent access, because in that case, Amazon will store your data in minimum one availability zone only. They guarantee in one AZ, but in standard infrequent access, it's going to be replicating in at least three availability zones. So thereby, you've got more resiliency in standard infrequent access. Again, looking at the minimum billing duration, it's 30 days for standard and also for the single availability zone storage tier. Now let's move down a little bit further, and we got Glacier and Glacier Deep Dive Archive. Let's quickly chat about that as well. So Glacier is for long-term archival. Now if you look at the description here, it says that it is used for archival. So this data is something that you're not gonna need very frequently. Maybe you want to see this data foreseeable in future, and there is no reason to access it frequently. Think about data that is required for auditing, compliance, log details, or anything that you want to keep it for long-term retention purposes, right? In that case, Glacier is a good choice. Now with Glacier, you do not get that millisecond access time. It may take several minutes or several hours to actually retrieve the file. And then there is a retrieval fees as well. Okay, if you look at the last column, there is a retrieval fee in all of these tiers. So Glacier retrieval fee will be per GB of data that you want to retrieve from the Glacier archive. There is a resiliency aspect here because the data is getting replicated to at least three availability zones, and that holds true for Glacier Deep Archive as well. The major difference between Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive is that the default retrieval time for the Deep Archive is 12 hours. The second difference is the minimum build duration is 180 days for Deep Archive, whereas for Glacier it is 90 days. Keep in mind that because these are minimum duration, that if you need the data in different storage class, you're still gonna pay the minimum for the storage class that it was originally in, okay? And then there is one storage class, which is the last one, reduce redundancy. And of course, it is not recommended by Amazon. So when do you want to use that reduced redundancy? Why do we have in this list here? Well, reduced redundancy is for data that is frequently accessed but is non-critical, as shown here in the description section. Overall, you got very low cost for this. Again, AWS plans to get rid of reduced redundancy from here. So if you do not see this when you're doing your labs, don't get worried because Amazon anyways had plans to get rid of it. Overall, there are several attributes that dictate things for a storage class. It could be object availability, durability, and frequency of access. Now, if you scroll up to the top, you got the standard storage class. Now, this is the default that is assigned to every object when you upload that object, yeah? So, of course, when you're uploading it, you can change the storage class to anything you want based on your requirement, but the default one is standard. But just keep in mind that once you set the storage class to something, you will be billed for that minimum duration. Alright? At this point, I will leave it as standard, click on next, and then just let it upload to our bucket in AWS. It's a big file, so it will take time. So I'm going to pause the video and then get back to this one once it is ready. Alright, looks like the file is uploaded here, and I'm going to click on it to find out its properties. On the right hand side, you will see a pop-up. And under the properties section, you got that the storage class is standard. What if you want to change it? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm going to click on that. And then you got the same section open up. You can go ahead and toggle between these. Let's say you want to move it to Glacier because you no longer need it. And you may need it maybe after, let's say, an year, because that's when auditing will start, right? So all you got to do is select that and then click on Save. And this file will be tagged with a new storage class. Alright, I'll go ahead and click on cancel and then talk about a new point, a new topic called as life cycles. When we started this lesson, we did speak about the agenda of this lesson. We said that we're going to talk about the storage class, and you know about that now. The second point is life cycle. The life cycle is how we move an object from one storage class to another based on a particular time interval. A few seconds ago, I did mention that you can move this object from one storage class to another by doing this manually. But what if there are thousands of files in your bucket? How will you get that automated? How will you automatically let the bucket choose the storage class for the files inside it? Well, that's where Lifecycle comes into picture. So let's take a look at what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and click on Management here. And then what you see here is the Lifecycle option. You can click on Add Lifecycle. Just enter a rule name. Let's say Lifecycle Policy. Say 1. And then you got the options to limit the scope to specific prefixes like the extensions or any file that has a particular tag, or apply to all the objects in the bucket. Okay, I'll leave the second option here and then click on Next. Now, if you have versioning enabled on the object, then you can go ahead and choose between current version and previous version. Well, you got the option to check and uncheck either of them or keep both of them together, but this is where you will select the transition. Okay, now I'll just select the current version and show you what's there inside the transition. At this point, my files are in the standard storage class. Okay, and then I would like to move it to, let's say, one zone infrequent access after 30 days. You can go ahead and edit this number, that's not a problem, but it just means that after 30 days or after the number that you define here, it will be moved to one zone infrequent access. That's how I'm defining the storage class of the object after a set duration of time. All right, I'll click next and the next and then go ahead and finish this. Now keep in mind that this rule applies to all objects in the bucket, so you can just check this and say, hey, I acknowledge this, I know, I'm aware of what I'm doing, and click on Save. And that's it. Now you got the lifecycle policy in place. And it means that my objects that are in standard storage class will be moved to one zone infrequent access after 45 days. So overall, what we have is an S3 bucket that is durable, reliable, and scalable. It is secure because you can go ahead and encrypt the content with the options that you have under properties and then under default encryption. So that makes it secure as well. S3 is one of the services that integrates with almost all of the other AWS services. This means that we can use a service, let's say an EC2 instance, and the output of the application in that EC2 instance can be redirected to your S3 bucket. S3 is very easy for us to get data in and out because we can upload the objects directly into the bucket. So you saw under the overview section how easy it was to upload the content inside the S3 bucket, right? We got pretty detailed administration capabilities of the S3 bucket. You can grant permissions to control who has access to the data, and there are quite a few different ways of protecting the data and how you can grant access to the right set of people. At this point, that's all for the S3 storage class. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next lesson.